Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
You mean the calf in the room?
This week, Pshat Ki Tissa, and in this week's Parasha, we find the very famous story of the golden calf, the story that follows us till today, that we learned all the way back in kindergarten, and many Midrashim, many Perushim have been said and have been written about this story. What exactly happened there to Am Yisrael? How did that story even end up being in reality? And what I want to do this week, as we do many times in our videos, is try to understand on the Pshat level, on the most basic level in the Psukim, in the written Psukim, what exactly went on over there. And because this is a very big story and has so many things that are going on over there, I want to specifically talk about the first part of the story, the beginning of the story. How did this story unfold? What triggered it? Because obviously, again, the biggest question is, how did Am Yisrael get to that place that they are worshiping an idol just after Matan Torah, how Sinai, where they saw God, where they heard God's words, and even had to go back because it was too scary for them. But more than that, when you look in the Psukim, like we say in many videos, you have to pay attention to the words the Torah is using to describe what is going on. And what triggers this story is Am Yisrael seeing Ki Boshesh Moshe was Boshesh, to come down from the mountain. And the question is, what does this Boshesh mean? We have the famous Gemara that explains it as Boshesh, 6 hour came. There are many Midrashim on this Boshesh, but again, on the Pshat level, this Boshesh sounds very familiar from a different word we found in the beginning of the Torah in Sefer Bereshis. Adam and Chava were erumim, were naked in one translation, and velo hitboshashu, they were not boshashu. And over there, again, on a Pshat level, it means that they were naked and they were not embarrassed by their nakedness. And we dove deep into the story over there back in Parsha's Bereshis. We'll link that video at the end of this one for you to watch. There's a lot more to that story over there. But back to our story over here, obviously that story and what happened over there is relevant to understanding what happened here on Har Sinai, where Am Yisrael were waiting for Moshe to come down from the mountain, and he didn't. So, 3 questions. What does this Boshesh here mean? What does it trigger? Why does it trigger all the story of the golden calf? And how did Am Yisrael end up doing this great sin of Chet HaEgel?
That's very interesting, that comparison between Boshesh, embarrassment, and the Boshesh here, which I think in the simple level means that he was delayed. He didn't come down. They're waiting for him and they see he's not coming. And what's really the connection between those two? But I think to understand that, let's first see the rest of the Psukim. What are they worried about? What's bothering them? They are bothered that Boshesh Moshe leredet min ha'ar, he's delayed, or whatever exactly that means. And then they come and say, Ki ze Moshe ha'ish lo yadanu me'aya lo. This Moshe, the Ish. Interesting, we've spoken in the past about the concept of being an Ish, being the one who stands up when nobody else is around. Moshe, the Ish, the one who was always there to stand up when we didn't know what to do, he's gone. We don't know what to do. Lo yadanu ma'aya lo. And it's interesting because we don't see that they say maybe he's dead, or they see maybe he's not coming back. It seems they have a problem with the fact that lo yadanu ma'aya lo, the fact that we don't know. They can't handle the lack of knowledge, being in the darkness. And this, I think, throws us back to something we've also discussed in the past around Matan Torah. When Hashem comes and speaks to Am Yisrael and they hear the dibrot, they turn to Moshe, and we see very similar words. Just like we see here, Vayar ha'am, ki boshesh Moshe leredet min ha'ar, we have Vayar ha'am, vayanu vayamdu merachok. They fear God and they turn to Moshe and say, you speak instead of us. And by the way, that's an interesting word. Vayar also means they saw, but is also connected to the word they fear. It's seeing that scared them. Also now they saw. What did they see? They didn't see anything, but they saw and feared what they were seeing, which is the fact that Moshe, they don't know where he is. They don't know when he's coming. And also back there, they couldn't handle this unknown, this greatness, something that was beyond them, seeing, hearing God. And they turn to Moshe and they say, you speak to us. We're used to you speaking to us. It's easier for us to listen to you. And Moshe over there tells them, don't worry, this is what it was for. It was so you will have God's fear upon your face. And then the next step is they stay back, and Moshe, what does he do? He walks into the darkness, into the fog. And we discussed that in detail there. But this is exactly the unknown that they're struggling with. They stay away from walking into that fog. They can't deal with that unknown. And the next step, Moshe goes into the Arafel Asher Shama Elohim, because you can't meet godliness without walking into that unknown, walking into what's beyond your ability to grasp and hold on to. And what happens is they see this and they wait and they wait, and Moshe isn't appearing. Moshe doesn't come up. And this is in complete contrast to what they had before. Before it was all in their face. Even Chazal talk about first version of Matan Torah, they talk about it being in public, being maybe too much in public, right? It's too out there. And that's what it was. It was noise and lightning, and it was all in their face, and they saw it all. And suddenly they shift from that to Moshe sort of going into the darkness, and they don't know what, and they don't know when, and they can't handle this fog. They can't handle this unknown. They want something that they can hold on to. They don't want to live with this fear on their face of the unknown. They create an egel masecha. A calf is egel. But masecha is an interesting word. It means a mask. They create a mask of a masecha. What is this calf masking? Maybe it's masking their fear. Maybe it's masking their inability to show their faces and to see that fear and to experience the unknown. They want something, and as we see this going on forward, they want Moshe. They want something to hold on to. They believe in God, but they can't handle godliness. It's too much. It's too out there. It's too unknown. It's not something they can hold in their hands. They want something that they can hold and turn to and hold on to and have that confidence, that stability, that's something to face, to look at, and to hold. They want to mask with the calf that unknown, that fog, that Boshesh Moshe Lavo. And I think that's exactly the meaning of the word Boshesh, as you said. Because what does it mean that someone is embarrassed? What does it mean that they were naked and not embarrassed? Naked is, it's out there. It's all in the open. There's no delays. I don't hide anything. It's all straight in your face. While being embarrassed is someone who feels he has what to hide. He feels less confident. He feels there's something that he doesn't know. He's not sure. There's some unsureness, some healthy unsureness. You know, being baishanim is something that Am Yisrael in general is described as a good thing, that we're sometimes shy, embarrassed. Not everything's out there in the open. There's a certain healthy humility. There's confidence is a good thing, but being overconfident is not always a good thing. So loit boshashu, not being ashamed, not having embarrassment over there, means that it was all open. There was nothing to hide, versus Moshe mit Boshesh is exactly the opposite. It's being delayed. Matan Torah isn't just out in the open, the noise, the thunder, the lightning, the excitement. It's suddenly something that's hidden. There's this fog, there's this unknown. That's where the real things are actually built, as the pasuk says, Ki Shama Elokim. That's when Moshe really goes in to meet godliness. It's not in the excitement of Matan Torah. It's actually in that unknown, in that hiddenness. And that hiddenness is exactly what scares them and what they're unable to handle. So as Rabbi Yehuda Levi and Kuzari says, they weren't looking for a God. They were looking for a Moshe. They were looking for something. Moshe was that thing. And we saw in the first version, when Vayar Ha'am, they were feared. What did they do? They turned to their first golden calf, which was Moshe, and said, you be there. We'll look at you and you take care of things. And when Moshe isn't there, they look for another mask. Something else to sort of be in between there, to not have them have to deal with this unknown. So in a sense, this goes back to what Chazal said about the Luchot Rishonim being in Parhesya, being out in the public. The Luchot Rishonim started as being sort of out in the open. It's all there in your face, looking at godliness straight in the face. And when it suddenly shifts to something that's a little bit more tsanua, that's a little bit more concealed, that's covered, that's unknown, Am Yisrael is lost. They want it in their face, just like all the other nations who are worshiping these idols, which they can hold on to, which it's in their face. Am Yisrael is not yet ready to understand that serving God comes with serving the unknown, serving the thing that you can't actually grasp. It's grasping the ungraspable. It's walking into that fog, into that unknown. It's being ready to feel comfortable with being in that fog, being in that unknown, knowing that that unknown is exactly where you can meet HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what they're not ready for. And that's why they're trying to look for coverings, for a mask, for an egel masecha. And only after a process are they really ready for the next version of the Luchot, which are really much more concealed as we've discussed in the past.
Very good. And exactly like you're saying, it's about faith, which is being comfortable in the unknown. That's what faith is. And that's the lesson that Am Yisrael has to learn after Matan Torah. Standing over there and, like you were saying, seeing godliness in their eyes, seeing the voices that were said, hearing God's voice and stepping back because of it. Now they have to feel comfortable to live in that unknown, to live in the reality of a desert where there isn't much things around, and you have to get comfortable with not having what you want or not getting what you want. And really, like you mentioned, the Kuzari touches that point, really, that the problem here didn't start from Am Yisrael wanting to worship an idol. It started from Am Yisrael needing something to grasp. That was the initial chet that Am Yisrael crossed. Later on, it developed into idol worshipping by the Erev Rav, as they said, Look, Am Yisrael, this is your God. That's what kind of pushed him over that cliff, going into that idol worshipping, which wasn't the intention in the beginning. As you were saying, the intention was to create something graspable, because the distance between them to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was too big for them at that point to handle. They needed that intermediate. They needed that person in between to connect them. And one of the interesting facts is that they turned to Aharon out of all the people over there. They asked him to create this intermediate, and the words they are using, Kum aseh lanu Elohim. And we mentioned this in the past, where when Moshe gets the job from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to go and take Am Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, Hashem told Moshe, you will be like a god to Paro, and Aaron will be like a prophet to Paro. And this is kind of what Am Yisrael are telling Aaron over here. We need this intermediate between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where is that God? Where is that Elohim that you yourself had? You have to make it for us, because like you were saying, Moshe Ha'ish, Moshe the person, the special person, that one person that was able to climb that ladder isn't here anymore. We don't know where he is. We don't know what happened to him, and we need that Ish. And there's actually a very interesting thing that we can add over here. You mentioned Am Yisrael are considered Baishanim, as the Gemara says, and the actual pasuk that the Gemara learns over there, David HaMelech called Am Yisrael Baishanim, and they bring that pasuk that you mentioned, Ba'avur nesot etchem, that pasuk from Matan Torah, when Am Yisrael stepped back and couldn't hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu's voices. The Gemara says this shows that Am Yisrael are Baishanim, that Am Yisrael have humility, have embarrassment in a good way. That's a good trait that Am Yisrael have in their character. But going to Masechet Avot, there's a famous saying from Hillel that said, Lo ha-baishan lamed velo ha-kapdan melamed, that the person who's too embarrassed, who's too ashamed, doesn't learn, and not the one who's too strict can teach. But the idea is that you cannot learn when you don't have the strength within you to step up and question what you're being taught, because you have to have that self-confidence to question what you're being taught. But also, on the other hand, you have to have the humility to accept the answer, to accept the fact that you might not know everything, that you might not get the full answer, and you might, like you were saying, be in that cloud, be in that vague place where there is no answer, because we can't understand everything. We can't grasp everything. However, the other side is that we need to have faith. Sometimes, even when we don't understand things, we still have to accept them. We take them and we live with them because of the faith we have in those things, that they are true and they are real. That's what holds us up. Without any masks, without any intermediates, without anything, that's what we have to be comfortable with. And maybe this is what brought Hillel to say, continuation of that Mishnah, B'makom she'en anashim ishtadel yot ish. That's exactly the end of the Mishnah. That's exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu was. He was the Ish. He was the one that was comfortable to step up in the place that was needed to be a person, to be a man, to be someone with the strong opinion, with the right opinion. And he knew to be that leader, to take after him, Am Yisrael, to make them follow him to the right direction, because that is what's missing so many times in life, so many places. As you grow older, you see that it's missing more and more and more. That person, that idea that on the one hand doesn't get confused, knows exactly what they want and what the straight path is, and on the other hand isn't scared, doesn't fear to walk into the arafel, to walk forward even into the unknown, because you have the faith, you have the emunah, and as we discussed last week, you're connected to your past, you're connected to your tradition, and this is what makes sure and helps you continue walking forward even into the unknown.
You know, maybe this also explains the end of the Parsha, because at the end of the Parsha, Moshe comes down the second time, and as we've discussed in the past, it's much quieter, there's no drama, no one waiting, he just comes down from the mountain. But an interesting thing happens, his face shines, and he puts a covering on his face. He hides his face. And this goes back to exactly those dynamics. Are we hiding or showing? Is it too much in the open? Are we naked or are we covering? And what happens there is when Moshe speaks to them, he uncovers himself. But the rest of the time, he covers himself. And maybe this is exactly what Moshe is teaching them here. Yes, there are times when we should not try to cover things up. When God speaks to him and when he's giving over God's word, he uncovers the covering. It's there, it's out. Don't try to hide. Be able to face things. And we shouldn't always try to hide everything, and be able to deal with things straight and look them in the eye. But at the same time, especially when dealing with spirituality, especially with dealing with godliness, but also in many things in life, not everything needs to be always out in the open. The rest of the time, Moshe covers his face. Spirituality, true deep things are found in the hidden, are concealed, are not out there in the open, are not always have to be there in your face, out there. The way to find true deep things are always the things that are more concealed, that are more hidden, that you need to search, you need to remove a covering to be able to see. That's exactly what we have here. It starts with them being disturbed that Moshe is covered. The exact opposite of being naked, Velo yitboshashu, Moshe is Boshesh. And it ends with Moshe teaching them exactly that. Sometimes we uncover, but sometimes we cover. We don't cover all the time, but we're able to understand that there are certain times and places for things that have meaning, sometimes have to be hidden, sometimes need that tzniut for them to be true and real. So that way we don't only focus on the external side of things, we're able to search for them, to uncover them, to search deeper and find true and deep meaning.
Beautiful. And really, it goes so much deeper than that, like you were saying, because the real relationships and the real things in life are built in tzniut, in private. Like we know the way we in Yiddishkeit and Judaism look at a relationship between a husband and a wife versus the Western world. It is something that is very far from the eye and something that we don't overexpose it in public. And all the way even to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, most of davening Shmoneh Esrei is always quietly a person says to himself, because that's your relationship with God. That's your connection to God. And it's your private thing. It's not something that you expose and you show off, and it goes way more than that and way deeper than that. And also with having humility and having some shame is a good thing, but on the other hand, knowing your way, knowing your path, and strongly believing in it and not being embarrassed by it is one of the most basic halachas we have in the Shulchan Aruch. In the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, that you shouldn't be embarrassed from other people by your faith, because of your faith. But we'll have to end here because we're really out of time. If you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to share it around, spread the Torah around, and like the video, comment below. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. Help us grow this channel. And we'll just remind again what we discussed last year. Last year we discussed Luchot Rishonim, Luchot Shniyim, the difference between them. Like you mentioned, the first Luchos that were given in a great theatrical event, great drama around it, comparing to the second Luchot that were given quietly, like you said. We'll link that video right now. And Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll talk again. More Talking Torah videos on different topics. Check out our YouTube channel.